it sounds as though there was a before 9/11 and after 9/11. Would you say that's kind of an accurate description?
We speak of intergenerational trauma, but we maybe barely speak of kind of like an intergenerational resistance. I think it's been, the phrase we've used is like, there's no magical number of how many times you can say I'm human. I learnt to resist before I had the words to resist.
Yeah.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Welcome to the 6 Degrees podcast.
We're really excited to have Dr Yassir Morsi on the podcast with us today. We'll be talking about a few interesting topics, but before we do, I would love to give a quick introduction to him. I mean, Yassir Morsi is a writer, political theorist and academic whose work explores race, identity and the experience of being Muslim in the post 9/11 West. He's known for combining political critique with personal reflection, often weaving memoir and theory to examine the complexities of Islamophobia, belonging and the politics of voice. His book, Radical Skin, Moderate Masks, investigates the pressures placed on Muslims to perform moderate identities in liberal democracies. Dr Morsi also teaches at La Trobe University and contributes regularly to public debates on race and the limits of liberalism. He's also currently completing the final months of his provisional psychology registration at the Australian International Academy, where he works as a counsellor with a focus on community wellbeing. Now, that is a very formal kind of introduction, but I think both of us know Dr Yassir from a variety of different community settings, and we feel very blessed to have him on this podcast today because alhamdulillah, he'll be speaking about his own mental health journey here, especially in relation to I guess especially in relation to him being an Arab Muslim man, and you know what that looks like in especially today's politics and today's landscape. We're also going to be talking about you know, anger and the feelings of that and how that often feels policed, and the really big feelings of helplessness that we feel within the community for a variety of different reasons, but especially within the context of our ability to do things for our community. We would like to acknowledge the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on where we are located today. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and to all First Nations people present with us today. We would also like to acknowledge the ongoing genocide and war going on in Palestine, as well as other oppressed countries such as Sudan and Congo. Before we get into today's episode, we wanted to take a moment to offer some context. As many of you know, this podcast is about lived experience, about holding space for the complexities, contradictions, and truths that are often unspoken in our communities. This episode is maybe one of the rawest we've recorded. Dr Yassir Morsi, someone who has long been a pillar in our community, joins us not as an academic or expert, but as himself, vulnerable and reflective. What you're about to hear is not a conversation tied up with easy solutions or hopeful resolutions. It's not really a lesson or a lecture. Really, it's a space to witness and to sit with the grief, the anger, and the weariness that many of us carry, especially Muslim men navigating a world shaped by surveillance, racism, and war. We're incredibly grateful to Yassir for sharing this part of himself with us.
So there's a lot of excitement. I think it's obvious for myself, for Hana, and everyone in the studio why we wanted the great Yassir Morsi here on the podcast. But for listeners that might not know why we were super excited, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a bit of a conversation and a back and forth as to why we wanted you on, Dr. Yassir. But I think the main part, and if I can tell them the story, we were at TIIP, so Traditionally Integrated Islamic Psychotherapy training, and there, I wasn't in the class, unfortunately, but there you had the opportunity to, I guess, share some of your vulnerabilities in front of a group of Muslim practitioners. And one of the members of our podcast team and 6 Degrees, Sundus, really took to that, and I think found it something to be of value for a lot of other people to hear as well in the community. You spoke a little bit about, you know, your identity as an Arab, brown, Muslim man within this landscape, and a lot of the helplessness that you feel being a part of this system, and the terrors and I guess the difficulties that come navigating it. And yeah, the fact that sometimes it feels like you can't do anything and you're always looked at for doing things. you know, as little as they might be. And I think that touched Sundus's heart, and, you know, hearing her being so touched by it, and then also hearing your recount of it, I think really inspired us to want to bring you onto the podcast because, yeah, I mean, I don't know if we have a space or a way for Muslim men especially to talk about these things, and I think so many of us feel this way. So alhamdulillah, that's why we've decided to have you on today.
Well, assalamu alaikum, and blessed to be here. Barakallah feekum. The viewers may not know, but I've witnessed to how much effort it takes to put this together, and I want to shout out to all the people who are here and organised this, and to Fufu the plant? Yeah. Fifi, sorry.
The plant, yeah.
But yeah, that was a bit of a harrowing experience, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe necessary, and so I'm happy to relive that harrowing experience again.
Yeah, we're making you repeat the trauma, aren't we? A little bit. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We're very blessed to have you here. And, you know, we were discussing and going through the amazing work that you've done and discussing, you know, how did it start? How did you get into politics? Was it a love for politics? Was it a anger at the injustice? A combination of both? You know, what was your journey like to become, you know, the prominent figure that you are now?
Well, thank you for calling me prominent. Allah Alam. I always feel like I'm always on the edge, on the margins, you know, shouting, banging on the door and so forth. So I appreciate the space provided. And to answer your question about how I got into politics, it was never a choice. It was not my first career. Wasn't my second, third or fourth. It is as cliche as it sounds, and it may be not too important to suggest that 9/11 is a moment in our history. It shouldn't be, but it was. And I remember I was studying at the time I wanted to become an architect.
Wow.
Yeah, build buildings instead of destroy them.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, then you found the slap. Right?
Yeah. Stuck for a lot. Yeah, so I remember somebody told me to switch on the television, and I can't recall exactly, but I recall remembering, if that makes sense. So this moment has become so confused looking at the television, and I remember writing about seeing my own reflection on the TV. I didn't even know how it's possible. I just remember seeing kind of Twin Towers collapse on my face in the reflection of the television, and it became a metaphor both for my work and my writing, as well as maybe the experience I've had that our bodies and our sense of self has been inscribed through this moment, through terror as a narrative about who we were. And it was that moment that without knowing, like honestly, without knowing why or how, I felt like I had to answer to something. And I just became political. I just started reading more and watching more, and it would take these very long walks. I was at TAFE. I'd walk all the way, like 2-hour walks, and just think and respond to George W. Bush and respond to John Howard and respond. And I then, Allahu Alam, how I developed the need to want to become a writer, but mostly the writing was like a metaphor for a voice. I wanted to speak. And then, I don't know, and then I'll accelerate a few years, and then try to get into university. I should say something, and it's often been asked of me not to say it. I was never very good at school. So the reason why similarly, I jumped out of different courses, and I wasn't very good at it, but I wanted to get back into uni and study, so I enrolled in different TAFE courses and so forth. I don't know why or how these ideas were sewn together. Maybe we can unpack it one day, but no one decision to become political. It was just, you plan, Allah's the plan. I really don't know. I'll give you a small story that kind of captures that it wasn't really intentional. I couldn't get into university, didn't have the grades, didn't have whatnot. So I was doing some online stuff, and I was like, I'm going to go to a TAFE, do some liberal art course. Driving down Manham Road, Bell Street, and traffic light stops. The turning lane next to me is free, and there's a big sign that says La Trobe University. And I'm like, I'm just going to try. I'm just going to go there and say, mature age student, let's see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? And I turned, it was like last day of February, something like that. Was not expecting to get in. I said, I'll try. Drove there, got in, and I was like, listen, I'm a mature age student. Is there any way? I've got some online courses that I've done and some type like that. The lady seemed rushed and whatever. And she's like, just give me your paperwork. And I was like, okay. And just so very casually, she's like, look, I think there's a chance for you for an offer if you can hand in your transcript by 5 o'clock.
Wow.
And it was just like that.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And I said I was never good at school. That first semester, I got straight A's.
Wow.
I got
Mashallah.
90s. It was because I was so committed and motivated. And then I look back and I think, in that, when I was driving, if it wasn't a red light, if there was another car in that turning lane, I wouldn't have made that turn. Allah, what would have happened?
Yeah.
I turned that way. I met my wife there.
Wow.
Wow.
I joined Latrobe University Islamic Society, and I went from struggling to find place to being neck deep in conversations with Muslims, and and then as I said, I did really well. Like I wasn't expecting. I remember my father laughed. He turned to my fiance, my wife at the time, and said, "I can't believe this." It's like. How did this
a lot of people find themselves at university and at Islamic societies. I personally did as well. And, I feel like that would have shaped and colored, but perhaps I'm wrong, but shaped and colored a lot of your understanding of the issues within the Muslim community, because it's a bit of a microcosm of what the big players think, the small MSA.
Yeah, there was burdens, responsibilities, ambition, hurt, pain, anger. There was... But like you said, a place to cultivate it all, and a barrier around it where we didn't need to perform, or sometimes we would come into the mosque and take our masks off and say what we wanted to say. And just watching that dynamic, but it was healing at different ways, but also harmful at different ways. So you can't collect traumas into a single place and not expect those traumas to strike you. And then I realized it was just a inability to put our finger on the pulse about what really we ought to do. But yeah, spot on, Ahmed. I do think MSAs are a very important place, often a transit lounge from school into the world, but also international students into the world, but also in many ways the final port before a lot of us go into the big bad, corporate world. So
absolutely. I was gonna say, I think it's interesting that you describe, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds as though there was like a political consciousness that awoke inside of you, and it was kind of like, it sounds as though there was a before 9/11 and after 9/11. Would you say that's kind of an accurate description?
Absolutely. But without it being conscious, something was within me. We speak of intergenerational trauma, but we maybe barely speak of kind of like an intergenerational resistance.
Yeah.
So something I inherited from my people. Maybe it was as small as a thing, seeing my uncle back in Egypt speak back to something. Maybe it was a prayer at a particular moment, Allahu Alam. But, I carry trauma, I see it and I understand. But, I asked the question that you're asking, why did 9/11 drag out this response from me? I had the option to look the other way. I don't think I would have not been racialized. I would have been racialized, but I had the option not to speak back. But that's another thing.
A moderate Muslim.
Yeah. Like I could have, and I often laugh about it now, because without romanticizing the Muslim community or the Muslim space, it's not an easy space.
No.
It's not easy at all. It's not overly rewarding. In fact, you sacrifice and give up a lot, sometimes for very little back, sometimes for pain. So I look back and I was like, what was wrong with you? Right? But also, you know how many times I've said I'm going to quit the community? Like, do you know how many times I've quit? Grand zero of none. Never. I left politics and I was like, that's it, khalas, I'm done. I'm going to become a psychologist. Ended up working at an Islamic school. Figure that one out.
It follows you everywhere.
Yeah. So something inside me, I don't really know how to put my, look, when it gets too complicated like that, I just say it's Allah's will. Something there. I do know I learnt to resist before I had the words to resist.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I mean, that really reminds me of like the fact, and I mean, it's come up in conversation a lot, but the fact that we as Muslims don't get a choice to be apolitical in this world, right? We are political beings, whether we want to admit it and talk on it and speak on it or not, right? It's either we can ignore it or like embrace it and embrace the difficulties that come up with speaking about what we want and what we believe in, right? And I feel like we come to these certain junctures where we're forced to make that decision. We're forced to be like apolitical, not really, but, you know, choose to be apolitical in the way that feels right to us, or be political beings that we are perceived as.
Yeah. So look, in my line of work at school, there's a difference that I notice within certain students is between avoidance and delay. I think a lot of Muslims try to avoid the political question, but they only end up delaying it.
Yeah.
It some way or another comes back to haunt us. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
The avoidance part?
Yeah.
I can't speak. Look, we as humans, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, we have a multitude of ways that we deal with anxiety, pain, trauma, difficulties. Some people run towards it, self-aggrandizing, fighting, swinging. Their anger is their shield. Other people run away from it. Some people disassociate like it's not there, over-identify with oppression in order to make peace with it. It's a stressor, it's a burden, and different psychologies and different people and different personalities have different ways of navigating it. I chose to swing.
Yeah.
And without saying it's the appropriate way, it's part of who I am, part of how I was put together. And you will find in the community some people who don't like it, and you'll find some people who love it. And that may match and mirror their own coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
The avoidance and it doesn't work. In my opinion, like...
It catches up to you.
Yeah, like I said, it's an act of delay. And like if you sometimes we have to strategically avoid conflict and it's survival.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to, but it should be done consciously. When it's done not consciously, it has a ugly way of returning when you least want it to.
Very true.
It's a bit of an elephant in the room. Like, you know, whenever something happens on the news, whenever a terrorist attack takes place, you feel like you have to answer for that. I know, Hana, you went to like a mixed school, as in like a non-Muslim school. I went to a non-Muslim school. And, you know, anything that would happen in the news, you're there. I become Adatan man. I become the president of the ICV. You have to answer and speak for the entire Muslim community, if not the entire ummah, right? And so that, of course, shapes a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think there's like this conflict within me. Like, why do I have to answer? Why do I have to be this person that answers these people?
And I don't have the answers.
I don't have the answers a lot of the time, especially when you're 12 years old. Like, and someone's asking you, why did you go back to your home country? Why did you guys do that for? Like, you have nothing to say to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I remember those moments where people would come up to me after like a terrorist attack had happened, turn to me and be like, so why did that happen?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not a terrorist. Like,
I don't know. I'm not the one that enacted that. And I think like your initial response is always to be on the defense, to be like, no, disassociate it from Islam, disassociate it from like your identity and, you know, just completely go away from it. But then again, like I feel like sometimes in doing that, we disregard our identity as Muslims.
Yeah. The way I've always defined Islamophobia, and one of the features of Islamophobia is to put every Muslim in a supposed dock where you are under, scrutiny, charged with not quite being human, possibly terroristic in assumption or sympathies, and then we have to plead our innocence and draw out evidence that we're human too, Australian too. So one of the features is it's a form of governing, and ultimately the first governor exists within youth, and it's used shame. Yeah. We're shamed. Yeah. So this moment that you're speaking about, Ahmed, when, oh my God, some event happened and we like hold our breath, and then some of us are angry at the terrorists, some of us are not in our name, and others are like, how do I answer this? And some want to be political and say, well, if this didn't happen and that didn't happen, but ultimately there's a bunch of energy, psychic energy, orbiting around us, dragging us into it, and it's tiring.
Very tiring.
It's exhausting.
And then you might think, okay, if it happens once and then there's a moment where I explain myself, then okay, we're off the hook. But it is a perpetuating, never ending. I think it's been, the phrase we've used is like, there's no magical number of how many times you can say I'm human. Because the function of racism and Islamophobia is to put you on that dock. Muslims are on a suspended sentence, continually under trial. And it's not because of who we are. It's very important to understand. It's not because of who we are. It's because of what we can say about who they are. And what we can, we have to understand one of the functions that we serve is to erase their history. Right?
Yeah, all the history that they've decided for us. Yeah.
Right. So, my function is not to talk about, like when you put me under this trial about whether or not I have the right values, wrong values, whether or not I've read the Quran right, what temperature Muslim am I, how close am I to terrorists, how far away from I am Australians, continual energy of proving yourself. One of the functions is I become the point of debate and not colonialism, not wars, not foreign policy.
Yeah.
Like, what is Islam doing to this young man?
So
and
true.
when that becomes the focus of the debate, it's a great way of erasing every other point of the debate. And unfortunately, and I don't blame anybody for this, we played that game and we still play it with
on
hope.
autopilot as well.
With hope that there's a correct answer to racism. There isn't.
Yeah.
It's a game. And the only way out of it, really, and I can't say you can escape racism, right?
Yeah.
But you have to challenge and disrupt its logic. You can't keep participating in it, because the more you participate, the more it has a hold of you. And like you said, it becomes autopilot, a trained response. And here we are, 2025, and some responses are still the same about what things have changed. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say the community hasn't politically evolved. We've all evolved, alhamdulillah, and different generations carry different tasks and different burdens. But there's still this need to be visible,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Show representation. Have our voice being heard, whether it's in parliament, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the street. Like, there is this... Sometimes I say alhamdulillah for it, because it's naive and yet beautiful, and it speaks to our credit of how much we cherish truth. And may Allah protect that and never changes, because I would rather that than us being overly strategic to win a game.
Yeah.
And that truth, that belief in truth is like, if we speak it, it will change hearts.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful ideal,
Yeah.
but racism doesn't match it.
Very true.
Some people might. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of us. Some people have that fitrah and they hear it. Yeah, and that's how we create allies. We do it, but sometimes it just keeps us stuck.
So true.
Yeah. And silence, or more importantly, speaking to your own and speaking to yourself and doing the therapeutic work that's required to unravel all of the various different cross sections of your identity that have been shaped by all of this is as important.
I think, you bring up mental health, and I think one of the topics that we wanted to bring up today was, I guess, what does it mean to talk about mental health as a Muslim man as compared to just anyone else?
I found it hard myself. There's expectations of what it means to be a man. I was raised only by my father. My mum and sister was in Egypt, and my dad raised me alone. Love him for all that he sacrificed for me. But he wanted me to be a man. And that's a result of his own trauma, because he comes from a world where you get stepped on if you're not strong. And I was a very sensitive young boy who came into a whole new world without anybody, no cousins, no friendship groups, nothing, and was picked on for being different and so forth, and didn't have a mother, nourishing voice, or somebody to hug me and say it was okay. Like, I remember, and I shouldn't out him this way, but I remember running away from my bullies when I was younger, and I ran as fast as I could, and I escaped them, only to walk home, open the door, and Dad was there.
Yeah.
He had seen me run. And he goes, one way or another, you're going to cop a belt in, man. It's like you either stand up for yourself or not. And so, rightly or wrongly, I love him. And a lot about me is because of him. But I wasn't really provided space to be able to break apart without fear that breaking apart was weak, wrong. I'm also cautious of not playing into the tropes and stereotypes of Muslim and Arab patriarchy, because it's not that simple. It's not as simple as biyarog il khalas. It's not that simple. It's actually the world isn't built for our vulnerabilities either. And I remember going into different mental health spaces, Muslim mental health spaces. Honestly, subhanAllah, it's like 30 sisters and 2 guys. It's always the ratio. It's like 1 to 10, 1 to 15, and at first I was like, what does this say about me? And then I remember talking, and like, this is not a criticism of anybody. I just remember talking. It's okay, you're safe, be vulnerable. And I was like, no, I'm not safe.
Yeah.
I don't know where you got the idea. This is a cliche that's said out loud. Be vulnerable and you'll be safe. It's never been my experience, ever. The more vulnerable I have become, the more they've weaponized and exploited my pain, my tears, my trauma, my anger, my breakdown against me. It's simply not true. I have to put it together. I had a friend tell me recently, like, no one knows you're in the demons. Like, you act like you're well put together in every public space. Like, well, practice.
Yeah.
So another part of what it means is, let's escape my own parental model and own family structure. I think it was one of the podcasts I've been on recently, like, why don't Muslim men report Islamophobia? And the brother at the other end of that conversation is like, it's because we find it demasculating.
For sure.
Yeah? Like, somebody tells you X, Y, and Z, I want to call up and say, hey, we're not put together that way.
No.
And then you're like, okay, well, you got to learn to report. Well, if I have to unlearn this defense, at what expense?
Yeah.
I can tell a kid, don't use violence, don't use words, don't use your body, don't use your anger to defend yourself. But then you have to ensure that if they strip us of our aggression, we're going to be safe. Because we learned to be aggressive to protect ourselves.
What's the alternative?
Yeah. So if I get into a car accident, say, with a guy in a BM and he's white and he's got a tie and suit, and I'm like, he can rely on a few things. He's confident enough to rely. Now, I'm not saying this is real or not real. I'm saying it's psychological, right? He's more likely to call the police, more likely to rely on the law, more likely to, because he feels that this world is built for him.
Yeah.
That he's confident that it will go his way. I have not been raised on that. I haven't been raised on the idea that the hegemony, that the law, that the police, that the institutions will protect me. The opposite, I feel hunted.
Yeah.
So whether it's right or wrong is another story. But in order for me to strip my aggression and be vulnerable, I have to be safe in a society and think, if I strip it or get rid of it, will I be held and understood? And one of the biggest examples of that is anger. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The response to Palestine as one of many, many examples. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's painful. But it is also angering. Like, if you're not angry, frustrated, want to break something, do not want to identify with this system, then there's something not right about you. You don't watch 19 months of innocent people get slaughtered while you're being gaslit, while the world tells you that somehow, and they just use this magical word Hamas to shut down all moral, ethical, political thinking.
Yeah.
Blame Hamas.
Very true.
And then you've got politicians who somehow the debate shifts around where it's about anti-Semitism now. Well, if that were the case, if you were this society that was so sensitive to racism, then you would have policed Islamophobia like you're now policing anti-Semitism. You're not. It's a civilizational difference. They belong to you, we don't.
Yeah.
And so now my anger has to be measured.
Yeah.
Tamed.
It has to be. And then like, well, anger is an affect. It's an emotional response. It's a result of injustice. It's been given to us, garnered within us in order to protect us against injustice. So if I'm asked to remove that, peel it back, retame it. Now, get me wrong, there's a distinction between rage and anger. Like, I'm not saying go break tables and so forth and whatnot and so forth, but the anger of wanting to break the thing that hurts you. Okay. Now, maybe there is an Islamic element of taming that anger, but then create and curate an Islamic environment for me where also I'm represented and protected through the same spiritual sources. You can't just remove that part and not nourish me in another way. Like, so...
What's our outlet as well? Like, as a community, we feel so much anger, but so many people claim to have the solution. The solution isn't really clear. There's no guide, there's no manual to, when you observe what's happening in Palestine, to be like, okay, I'm going to do this and this is going to help the situation. You don't feel like you can do enough advocacy, you don't feel like you can donate enough money, you don't feel like you can watch enough of the news, you don't feel like you can do enough of anything to make any kind of impact. And that does something to our psychology.
Yeah, I mean, you're asked to watch and accept.
Exactly. But, you know, it's almost like at uni when we were having the discussions with the university about their complicity in the genocide, and they would offer us a lot of mental health support. Yeah, I wouldn't need it if there was no genocide, if you weren't complicit. Like, that would be the solution.
Yeah.
But sorry. No, and if you went to the counsellor or if you went to the mental health services, what do you think they would say?
Like, what coping strategies are you going to give me? I'm like, that don't involve me ignoring the reality. At the end of the day, the reality is the reality. I'm not facing something that's happened in the past. There is an active genocide. You know, you just open WhatsApp. Like, I just open WhatsApp. You go and you check people's stories. You know, every uncle and auntie, they post stories, and I find it kind of amusing. But you'll see people's stories involve what's happening in Palestine. And yesterday, someone posted a video of people massacred in a mosque, leg there, like here, arm there, broken, so many pieces. You switch your phone and you have to go back to a normal day, a normal life. There is no outlet, and you can't even be angry. That's all internalized frustration and internalized pain. Like, what is the solution? I don't know.
Yeah.
What is the solution for the pain? What's the solution to the problem? I'm not sure. I'm not sure we have it.
Yeah.
And especially as like, I mean, obviously I'm a woman, but as a man, like,
Obviously you are.
obviously I come from a different perspective, but especially as a Muslim man, like, your anger is being policed, your rage is being policed, like whatever you feel is being policed by these people who want you to act and behave in a certain way. It's not just your community, or I guess it's not even just the stigma of being a Muslim
even
man.
within the community, like, we have to start off the conversation with, I'm not a terrorist, but here's my perspective.
Yeah.
You know, even no political conversation has nuance, you know, that involves us. Like, the very first question they ask us is, do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah.
What space does that
Yeah,
create?
look, the majority of my received Islamophobia has been from the community. Like, that's not their fault. It's because the structure of Islamophobia has pressured us to police us. Yeah. So the community at one level and peak bodies at one level, they're just managers for the state.
Yeah.
One of the things we have to manage is male aggression. Because historically and otherwise, male aggression turns into militancy, and militancy turns into conflict and violence. So we look for softer approaches, and then you have to kind of demasculinate this idea of an Islam that is ultimately not capable of militarily and otherwise talking back. We'll find other solutions. Now, you may say, oh, that's a civilized world, but you're dropping bombs.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy to come to the table if the other side stops being violent.
Yeah.
It seems to me that it's a one-way street, right? So that part is, as you said, it's where do I go? What do I do? And then ultimately you find cracks inside of you and so forth, and then maybe you over-identify with a subtler, slower, softer version of Islam and so forth. But then guess what? That doesn't work either.
No.
How many interfaith dialogues do we need?
Yeah, right? It doesn't work either. And like you said, and you said it well, like, sometimes I feel like they just want me to sit and watch.
Yeah.
And then what?
Absolutely.
And so that's the political part of it. I mean, there's a family dynamic, social dynamic, and so forth. Also, we're not valued. I genuinely believe that. Like, we're not valued. Look,
When you say we, who are you
Muslim
referring to?
Arab men, especially in the West. We may be in different spaces. And there's also a significant misunderstanding. Like, look, I don't want to over-romanticize this. We are harmed, we are damaged, but we're also damaging and harmful, right? So it's not easy to say I don't play this, we're victims. I say there's cycles of violence, there's a lack of outlet, there's an inability to express or create the world that you want to create.
Yeah.
And ultimately this fractures and leads to displacement. Maybe therefore we start over-policing sisters, we start trying to assert our dominance in different spaces. And I'm not saying that it's not a responsibility and let us off the hook or anything like that, but it is an analysis of our lack of value. Like you can't say I count, but then everything I want to build doesn't count. You can't say I count, but my anger and pain doesn't count. You can't say I count, but ultimately my worldview and political trajectory doesn't count. And there was an image that came out of Gaza where we saw men stripped to their underwear, guns at their back, being pushed towards some corner around the house, probably a hole, and executed. May Allah reward them, right? And then we see photos of all men of different ages stripped down. I just want to ask you all a question. What other group of men could you strip to their underwear and put their oppressor with a gun behind their back and it would circulate globally?
Yeah.
What?
Really?
If that was a Muslim man with a gun to back to 200 Jewish or white men, what do you think would happen?
No way.
It's like an analogy. We got stripped of our dignity, stripped of our ability to fight. And even when they do death tolls, they can't tell. You know why they count women and children? Yes, it's highly proportional. Yes, men are targeted. You know why? Because we can't tell whether or not the men who are killed are Hamas. And even if they were Hamas, there's ways to do war, by the way. You can't just bomb a hospital and say Hamas was under there. That's not, you grow up and say these are the rules of engagement. Then they get suspended when it comes to the militant Arab Muslim man.
Yeah.
Like literally, international law doesn't count because it's Hamas.
Yeah.
Human rights don't count because it's Hamas. Hospital schools aren't hospitals and schools.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then you say, well, I'm not, actually, I am valued in your ability to do something to me, but my life is not valued. My world's not valued. And, okay, khair, leave it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not, like at one level, I'm like, you do you, yeah?
Yeah.
But then your own brothers do it. Your own brothers do it. And that's when it stings. When you get called, look, how to do this, I'm going to sound arrogant. I have a PhD in politics. I have written books and published articles, taught at university, Melbourne, La Trobe, done over 300 engagements in politics. My thesis was on Muslims and liberalism and democracy. I have given up so many opportunities to work elsewhere. I've been community orientated, and I provide a critique of Muslim vote matters. And the response is, it's kind of like a prototype, primitive version of a terrorist. No, really it is. They don't call me that, but they strip it of all its language. But the archetype, what am I motivated by? I don't want solutions.
Yeah.
I want to sabotage what good Muslims are doing. I can't handle working with broader society. My expertise, my commitment to my community is all taken off me. And what am I reduced to? Threat.
Yeah.
I'm a threat.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm trying to help our community saying, hey, this MVM thing has holes in it, has gaps in it. No. Oh, this is so typical of, this, and if you build a reputation, this is what Yassir does, stuff like that. When your own community does it, I promise you, man, if I was blue-eyed, blonde hair, had my CV, came in and said, hey, listen, let's figure out why Muslim votes don't matter in these instances.
Open arms.
Open arms.
Yeah.
They'd listen to me.
Very true.
Or they'll give me enough dignity to spend time to criticize me appropriately. And I have to fight tooth and nail to get a space in my own community.
Yeah.
To say, hey, listen, I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to explain to you the massive traps that this system does as a result of 20 years of studying it. But I get reduced to that threat. For example, there are moments, literally, I don't care about microaggressions. I hate highlighting them because a lot of people go, oh my God, how could they? Couldn't care less about microaggressions. Let's be clear about that.
Why?
Because I think it's been employed and used to police our thinking and move it away from capital R racism. We obsess over small r racisms, the way we're treated interpersonally, the way people say something to you. Can't believe they told you to go back to where you came from. I'm Australian too. What do you mean you speak good English? And we show this level of stop.
Yeah.
Our life is very good here in comparison to the vast majority of people in the world and the vast majority of countries we've come back home. So society and us over police small r racism, small I Islamophobia at the expense of a political education of what capital I Islamophobia is. War, displacement, economic policies that subject us to significant amount of poverty, detention centers, the lack of international coverage to protect us. And Gaza's an example of that. And you want me to care about a Karen at the water cooler that says, oh, Yassir, you speak very good English. Yeah, I do. I'm not offended, right? What I want to know from you, Karen, is what do you know about Gaza?
And institutions, policymakers, they're not often aware of the distinction. Conversations, again, I keep using it as an example because it was very eye-opening, but conversations with the university, they couldn't fathom why, despite having so much, legislation and so much work that they put into, like you said, small r racism and priding themselves in being such an open, inclusive university, that they weren't an open, inclusive university because of their stance on Gaza. And they couldn't see why the two...
Well, also, small r racism is about them. They want a cohesive, functioning, nice society where violence from overseas and traumas from overseas, you don't carry with you all that pain, right? Because they're trying to govern their space. So while they're policing here, they don't mind if the bombs are dropping over there. But you and I have signed a different contract with God, with our mirror, with ourselves, with our ummah. I'm not going to forget. I'm not. And so these small r things, like honestly, like, look, don't get me wrong. When sisters get their hijab ripped off them and when some people are beaten and spat on and stuff, it's horrible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not undermining that. But there is an obsession with interpersonal forms of racism and Islamophobia at the expense of and they're tied. I promise you, my heartbreak has less to do with the way I'm treated because, truth be said, my life in Australia is okay. The reason why it's not okay is because of everything that's happening overseas.
And that's when small r racism gets out of hand, when we have a terrorist attack or something like that. Or
exactly, yeah. But if I were to remove everything internationally and all the bloodshed that I've witnessed and everything I've seen and just focused on my life in Australia and no one said anything to me or did say, like, alhamdulillah, man, like it's a blessing. It's a beautiful country. It's fairly functional, right? But the only time I'm policed and hated and discarded and treated like is when I stand up, when I speak up. Universities will love you. You're the face of token diversity and an expression. And not only that, bro, it's not even about that symbolic gesture. You bring in money. International students bring in money, which you're going to do an encampment now.
How could you?
Right? And then there's this push and pull thing. Yes, freedom of speech. Yes, they have a right to yes. No, security stuff like. And that suddenly sounds like social cohesion and security of others and safety. Trump. The idea of your right to free speech. So to go back to these stereotypes, you carry these angers and so forth, and then there's the exceptional Arab is also a stereotype, which is to say, you've done well for yourself. You should be like the amount of times.
You've settled in, you've assimilated.
And then that's a pressure too. Yeah. Do you know how many times many of us walk around trying to prove how integrated we are?
Yeah. All the time. We were just talking about it before, about how a lot of you talk about political consciousness, or we talked about at the start, and I think really the part of myself, or my 9/11, as I want to call it, before that I was trying to just fit in. I was just trying to be the same as everyone else because that was the least threatening. That was the most appeasing to them. Yeah.
And that's another stereotype. So the stereotype of the reformed, integrated, fixed Arab man, in this sense, is the one that controls his temper, works with society, is hardworking, has family values of whatnot. But ultimately, you can't be militant.
No.
So what do you think the question, do you condemn Hamas is trying to find? What do you think it's trying to explore?
Whether we have that fighting spirit.
Whether you're that.
Yeah.
And like, they're not even interested in 75 years of Palestinian
The question should be rephrased, are you a terrorist?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and
Let's
it's
just
a
go.
double. The question was we'll call it double bind. There's no correct answer, by the way,
No.
because the function of the question is to put you on trial. And what do you do when you put you on trial? You don't put Israel on trial. Yeah, that's the function of the question.
Very true.
And so then we go talk about mental health as a result. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm early in my journey, but when a world and an environment and does not nourish you, does not allow you to explore key core emotions, raw feelings, then ultimately we repress and so forth. And then it becomes like, at one level for me, and again, I'm not an expert, a lot of it's energy. I expend a lot of energy performing to survive, which means I'm taking that energy away from healing, right? And so I'm constantly aware, like it's the hypervigilance is not that whether that car is an AFP. The hypervigilance is like, what are they thinking? What are they doing? And then it's not just like, I want to be careful, because I'm not just like, because now we're at a stage it's like, I'm not going to perform for you. I'm not going to perform for you. But then you go like, yeah, can I have a chai latte, please? And then like, you're like, was I performing?
Yeah.
You start policing the police and like this and that, because you're not in your natural habitat. You can't just let go. Like, you start showing shame if you had to survive. If somebody did ask you a question about Palestine and you said, look, I don't feel like I want to talk about politics. And then you're like, okay, maybe that's the thing that you needed to do in that moment. But then later on, you're tossing and turning in your bed and saying, did I just sell my people out?
Yeah.
It's
Did I
hard
just
to-
sell my soul, my
Yeah.
beliefs? Yeah.
And that's the environment we're in. It's not like there's a right way, wrong way. I can tell you, you can speak truth to power. Guess what power is going to do to you when you speak truth?
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to do? It's going to give you a sticker. It will one day. It will one day. When we call it necrophilic love. If you notice that Hollywood movies and other things, when they kill off the threat, when the war is long gone, suddenly they make movies about the bravery of the Vietnamese soldier, right?
Yeah.
Like suddenly Malcolm X is in every poster, right?
Yeah.
Like there's always this, we will love after we kill.
Yeah.
We will love the dead. And then like there might be a time where they will celebrate the encampments on university as an expression of Australian
100%,
democracy.
100% they
right?
will. Yeah.
You know, look at these brave students that stood up.
Yeah.
Right?
And embodied our values.
Yeah.
Of freedom of speech,
Of freedom
blah,
of
blah,
speech,
blah.
yeah.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
And that's the other thing. Like, so when there's no space or support, and then you go to the family.
I think what that stereotype of, or this archetype of the Muslim Arab man says, is that there's no nuance. There's no happiness and sadness. There's no anger and love. There's only one dichotomy. And that's the one that they want you to have.
Yeah. And it's true. That's the pressure. But there is another element to, you call it patriarch. I don't, terms are terms and I'm exploring it. It's not a judgment. A lot of us are burdened with being leaders of families and leaders of communities and leaders of spaces and to fix things and do things and fight things and so forth and whatnot. So I ask a question. How do you deal with feeling helpless?
Yeah.
What do you do?
I don't know.
What do you do? Like, I cried a lot over Palestine, mostly by myself. Scrolled through the phone and I was seeing some of the most horrific images. Now, mind you, I've been studying violence for the violence they've done for 2 decades. There's a uniqueness about Gaza, and then there is a familiarity about it. I don't have to make it exceptional. Genocide is part of the function of a colonial world order. It's always tried to kill off people, steal land, and do the rest. And I got hurt. But you know, there was one video in particular that really hurt me, and the one that really, I've said it before in different places. It was an Arab man, maybe my age, maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger, Allahu Alam, goes to the top of his roof. You can see billows of smoke in the background. We've seen those images of Gaza in rubble. Like, it is phenomenal. They expect us to stare at that.
And be okay.
That level of destruction. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then all of that's in the background. Smoke is billowing and he's got the camera and he is saying to me, because he's speaking to the ummah, he's saying to me, almost like, my heart can mend and heal for all of this because it's a test of Allah. But the one thing that hurts me the most is the shame I feel for my ummah who has to sit and do nothing. You do nothing. Bro, I had to put the phone down. I feel so helpless. I don't know what to do. I genuinely don't know what to do. Like, okay, I'll go talk. To who? I go protest. How many times? We went 40 weeks in a row. How many times? And then what do our politicians and our public society do? I have almost always in my head my father's voice, if I'm not winning, I'm losing.
Yeah.
It's not like if I'm not winning, I'm growing. I'm not winning, I'm losing. Yeah. And that's a function of the world around me, because when I see what's happened, this is going to sound crazy. I'm not going to say it's right. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm just going to say what it is. When I see what's happening in Gaza, like I see what's happened in other places in the world, I feel responsible. Yeah. Like I'm a failure. How could I let that happen?
The onus
Yeah.
feels like it's on you.
And it shouldn't be, but it is. And then that's how the way maybe we've been raised. And when I say this out loud to other Muslim brothers, and it's not just Arab, they nod their head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so therefore I've got a world that can't nourish me or heal me. And then I've also got a world that won't let me fight. So what do? I go and I work and I build and I work and I build and I work and I build. And then, alhamdulillah. That's it. Yeah. To preempt a question you may ask, what would I like for Muslim Arab men, not just Arab, but like Muslim men, I think, who share Islamic or an Ummah type of sensitivity? I honestly don't know, man. Sorry, bro. I don't know. I do know one thing. There are times when I speak and I am honest about the pain that some other brothers feel visible.
For sure.
And sometimes they speak and I feel visible. So that's why we spend more time with each other, because it's all that's left. Then we go out on Monday morning, put a mask on, drive our car, do our work, be polite, come back home.
Yeah.
Take the mask off. And I work in an Islamic school and I still put a mask on.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes we have our masks on around each other too.
Yeah, of course, especially. So much shame there, like, yeah.
Yeah, subhanAllah. That's really heavy.
I'm so in my own head, I have nothing to say.
No, I swear, I really relate to that, and maybe not in the way you do, Kamal, but
As a woman. Because I am a woman. What did you say? I can't remember.
As a woman, yeah, as a woman. I think the helplessness you talk about is something so poignant within all of us as an ummah. And like you said, where do you go with it? What do you do? But I feel like the one answer I have is that I can't turn to like Western psychology or Western society to fix it. But then sometimes it feels like I can't turn to my own community as well.
Yeah.
But
especially when so many people within our own community have turned to the very same systems that have brought us to the same situation we're in. Not just Western psychology, but Western politics, Western ideas and ideologies. Probably better to comment on that than I am. But it's like, how has our community internalized so much that we can't even realize that the problem is external?
in relation to some of the themes that we're talking about, especially about helplessness, I think a lot of us feel like pretty little princesses, in our worlds, consuming, our little coffees and being annoyed at the fact that it's not strong enough or hot enough or whatever it might be. And really, then it kind of strikes us that we're living with this much privilege. And it feels as though that there's such a guilt for surviving and having it easy and being okay while everyone around us is suffering. Or at least the people important to us, our ummah, the Palestinian people and all other Muslim oppressed nations across the world are suffering.
Yep.
That paradox is so incredibly hard to navigate.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, Yassir?
So guilt is, it's a common friend. It's been around my life, around me. I feel guilt about all sorts of things. Things like, I heard a definition of guilt. It's like something you've done or something you haven't done. And it's a moral compass. So you feel bad about not doing it or bad about doing something. And it's absolutely right. The structures of my life, when I think about what my cousins and broader family have, type of life they have compared to mine, I do. Absolutely. I feel incredibly privileged, alhamdulillah, but there is a part of guilt. But it's also, I got another guilt, for example. I don't speak about Sudan as much as I speak about Palestine. I feel terrible. But I don't know enough about Sudan. And even though my wife and her family lived there, I feel bad.
Dr. Yassir, we've been talking, and I think as I'm sitting here, I just have this overwhelming feeling about how I feel, and I know that this is echoed a lot, especially in public discourse recently, but the fact that I feel so guilty for feeling guilty, and I feel selfish to be struggling when objectively there are people who are suffering worse than me. And it sometimes all feels like there's just not enough you can do, not enough you can say, not enough you can be in order to kind of combat that. I don't know what to do about that.
Neither do I. Don't look at me. Guilt is a powerful emotion. It's guilt I can accept as a friend that lives side by me. I don't always like their presence in my life, but guilt is a moral compass that wants to tell us what we're doing wrong or what we're not doing enough. Shame, on the other hand, is not so much about things we've done. Shame is about who we are. Shame I have less time for because it's trying to break you down as a person, say you're unworthy. Guilt sometimes is like a coach. Now, sometimes the delivery of guilt, the voice that it comes in. So guilt it's a friend, but sometimes in the way they do their friendship is difficult. Now, to the point of us living in the first world and having to witness, it's always bothered me, it's always driven me. Maybe when we were speaking earlier about the thing that brought me to where I am, subhanAllah. I remember you see, my father's trauma was poverty. My family back home, Egypt back home, it's a different type of poverty than we see here. It's not so much just your family, it's everyone. There's things that are burned into my psyche I can't get out of. It's small things, it's details. It's not like you see poverty, you see people living in the streets, but then you see other things that you like. For example, my uncle has been a mechanic since he's 13, and he'd been working for decades. And he can't stop working because it's not like this superannuation, this and that. It's survival. But his hands had motor oil, almost like a tattoo. He could never wash it off because he's been using his labor for so long. And then I go home to Australia and I'm frustrated at my PlayStation controller, and I throw it, and then I'm looking at and then I remember my uncle's hands, and I feel bad about my privileges and so forth and whatnot. And maybe that is a sign that says, hey, look where your mind is taking you. Look what attachments that you have. Maybe that's a good thing. And there are other moments. I remember I was walking down a tunnel when I was going to school in Egypt, and I saw this silhouette of an old lady sitting on the street with maybe something next to her to collect money. She looked like my grandmother. I was like, what, Siti, what she's doing there? I'm getting close and I'm haunted. It's called the uncanny. It's a familiar but different. I was like, why would my... And then it wasn't my grandmother, and I just walked past uncomfortably. But then 10 steps in, I was like, it's not my grandmother, but it's somebody's grandmother. Yeah, I saw another image in Egypt of a man who was again asking for money, sitting at the side of the street. His whole leg was swollen because it was infected. I did this weirdest thing. I was walking up and down because I wanted to give him money, but I was too embarrassed, shy. I didn't know how to do it. Do I just drop it? Do I say something? I didn't know what to do. It was like again, it's me centering myself and whatnot and everything. But then it occurred to me later, his entire living is based on pain. It's like, that's how he makes his, like he has to show you his pain.
Yeah.
And so there's plenty of these things. But you know what? There's also things we don't do. And I mentioned, like, I feel guilty about not speaking about Sudan, right? So privilege comes in different ways. It really does. I mean, then I said to myself, well, I don't know enough about Sudan. Well, why don't you know enough? Like, well, Al-Aqsa, Palestine, yeah, but we're all an ummah. Like, and then it occurs to me, the privilege for us works in different ways. One of the reasons why Palestine is a key moment is, yes, the violence, but it's also because the violence is done by the West and an ally of the West in Israel. We do center the West's violence. We speak to it. We get hurt by it. Yeah. Right? So we know about the West's aggression, the West's violence, because it's almost like maybe in the back of the head we're expecting them to be different. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like the images I've seen in Gaza, I've seen in Syria. Then Syria became too complicated. It became this faction, that faction, and so forth. And yeah, I feel guilty all the time about what I can and cannot do. But at the same time, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala burdens with what our shoulders can carry. I'm also trying to escape the savior complex. It's not I can't speak for everything and everyone all the time. I can't provide for solutions. I have to do my best. I just have to speak when the moment comes to me. But yeah, look, I actually would say if you're feeling guilty about living in the first world and at the expense of the ummah and you're not doing enough, then alhamdulillah. I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. But if that guilt is just a nagging voice that just, this moment it flips, because it's really saying you're a good person because you feel guilty, right? It has to translate into deep questions about our role and place in our life and what we're doing.
And action.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
But when guilt also transforms into shame, that I find less comfortable with.
You know, when you speak, it reminds me of like my gripe with Western psychology, I think. You know, we're taught to manage our emotions, regulate our emotions, you know, a lot of guilt and even shame, you know. I think sometimes shame has a time and place, you know what I mean? Maybe not in the context that we're speaking in now, but we're told to push it away. Right, we're told to fix our guilt. You know, you shouldn't feel guilty for this. It's just the life you've been served, whatever it might be. I think what happens is we push down those emotions, but we don't realize that feeling those emotions is what makes us human and also what makes us powerful individuals. The powers in play want us to suppress those emotions because those emotions tell us things. They make us do things. They make us start revolutions, end revolutions, whatever it might be, right? But what Western psychology does sometimes, I feel, is put the onus, or not even the onus, but it wants you to look inside always, right? Oh, you feel this way, you feel sad. Guilt is a negative emotion. You know, take it away. Move it aside. Sadness, it's not a good emotion. You know, fix it. Cognitively structure your brain so you're not feeling your sadness anymore. But no, like sometimes I want to reclaim my emotions from society and what society is telling me to just be okay, just be happy. It's all right. You're privileged. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I struggle with psychology. Like, if I'm honest, I wonder if I'm good at it. I don't know. And I've got to be careful not to transplant one expertise onto another place because I spend a lot of time studying politics and I'm comfortable with who I am and understand my place in it. I've never found my place in psychology yet. Don't get me wrong, I've spent 7-8 years studying it and I feel like I'm trying my best and I do see and I follow the guidelines, but there's certain things about it that just, whether it's Western or otherwise, I don't know what to do. And one of the things is that you're mentioning, even like the structures. I remember the first time I read the DSM-5 and so forth and tried to understand the symptoms of anxiety. And there was this recurring thing that my supervisors and others at university taught me and so forth. You can have anxiety, you can have symptoms of depression, but really it becomes a diagnosis when it disrupts your functionality. That got me thinking, and then I was like, what, you mean I can have these really heavy, difficult and feelings, but if I'm working and doing my job and...
It's all about productivity.
Yeah. And then I was like, well, that doesn't, but I don't know. I became suspicious. I don't know where I'm going. And then ultimately the structure of the state and the way health works and what constitutes a healthy subject, I couldn't help. Do you know how hard it was for me to distance my politics from learning psychology? I'd work into a lecture and my brain would be like, rip it apart. This ain't real. This is biopolitics. This is governmentality. This is the idea that they just want a happy laborer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
100%.
And I'm like, no, just you're a student now. Don't do that. Don't do that. And I was like, no, what? No, what do you mean? And then they would do these things and phrases. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like I did an experiment about studying culture and psychology. I was like, that's not culture.
Yeah.
That's you instrumentalizing culture into data points to do an experiment. And I'm like, that's not culture. But anyway, when it comes to psychotherapy, I just realized that rapport and presence is the most important thing, and this idea of trying to fix somebody, which I was taught not to do, but also the pressure of and sometimes it's just been there for, and like I work at a school, so it's just been there, just listening, just hoping, not burdening people with any attempt at solving something. But then Gaza happened, and then like people are asking the therapist to fix something. And like I think Ahmed said before, I'm like, you can't fix this because the stress is still there.
Yeah.
Right? What you can do is ask me to cope with it. And then you're going to have to deal with a counterpoint. Is me coping, avoiding it? Will that lead to guilt? Like I met people like, I'm forcing myself to watch. Then other people are like, don't watch the images.
Yeah.
Like, I'm forcing myself to watch. Don't watch the images. Then you have this whole debate that's both political and psychological at the same time. So, on top of that, Western psychology sometimes borrows a lot, certain modalities borrow a lot from Christendom and the notion of a confessional subject who lets it all out, and then ultimately feels relief by letting it all out because the judgment from the space and somehow it's a bit confessional.
Yeah.
And of course,
it's in a vacuum as well, right? The confession happens in a vacuum, not concerning, like you said, the hypervigilance, the paranoia you might feel, the anger that you might feel that is not able to be expressed as a Muslim man.
Absolutely. And there are times where the dynamic of that room and me being a man and may be healing, and sometimes there's a distance required. I suspect that, look, I went to a therapist once, psychologist once, after Christchurch, and I went 2-3 sessions before I started studying psychology, and it was so weird. Like
Describe that to me.
She wasn't a bad person or anything.
Yeah.
I just spent 90%, maybe this is like, I look back now and go, okay, she's probably doing CBT or whatnot, looking for my cognitive distortions and my
Your core belief.
core beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And I just gave her the ummah, the community. And everyone's just like, I can't find this.
Yeah, and she doesn't know what to do with it.
Right, there's a whole maze. Like it's a layer upon layer. And wallahi, after the first session, 15 minutes, she goes, it seems to me like politics is important to you.
Thank you.
Really? And like, I felt sorry. I was like, well, yeah, well, it's not that it's important. That's an understatement, right? Yeah. And like, I didn't even describe 90% of it. And I had to like this person and then that person and this community and then there's the board. Like you have to understand that the board, but they're fighting with another board. But ultimately what we're trying to do is like, should we have open mosque days? Because it's that, and like.
What is she going to do with all of that?
And so there's a lack of familiarity, but then at the same time, I'm like, I didn't want to sell my community out. I just, subhanAllah, it's like, it's for me. She's non-judgmental. It's confidential. I just felt that white gaze and I couldn't say, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say this because a bunch of Muslims are sellouts. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
Even though whether it's true or not is irrelevant. It's a feeling, It's like, okay. But then I've had also Muslim psychs, and I'm like, I don't know if you're judging me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I say I'm struggling to pray, even saying it out loud, like it's okay, I pray, but and then you come and say certain things, like I'm going to talk about that space that Sundus was speaking about. I have no idea why I did what I did.
Why you spoke in front of
idea.
that room
To
of
this day, I'm
practitioners.
like, you must be lonely. Like, why are you doing that? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And may Allah forgive me, I'm not saying anybody's bad, or I just didn't trust the space.
Yeah.
And I don't know why yet. So I don't know why.
Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of people came up to me and was like, how'd you find it? How'd you find it? And so yeah, it was interesting. But I didn't trust the space because I don't know what Islamic psychology is at the moment. Yeah. At the moment. But again, I'm learning. And part of the reason why I don't know what it is at the moment is because I feel like it's Western psychology translated into Islamic phrases. And I don't know if that's true. Forgive me, I'm very early, right? So I don't want to dismiss or dismantle anything that is unfair. But at the same time, it's still expecting me to be put in a seat, unravel, okay? And then ultimately, yes, alhamdulillah, we rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I don't see psychology as that. It's as a practitioner, we're constantly looking for patterns that are not said, patterns that you're delivering, patterns that you're making, and so forth. And the mental health footprint that I have is social, political, as much as it is about my family. So for me, if an Islamic psychotherapist is not well versed in politics, are you really going to get me? I don't know about others, Allahu Alam. Like, it's like, I could talk to you about my dad, but it's not really him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to get me? Because I can find sakina or solace in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without this therapy session. Right? And I appreciate what you're doing. Don't get me wrong. This is me. So when I was doing that, I'm like, why? All I did was show everybody I had pain. Why do you want that?
Why is that so powerful?
Yeah, why? Like, I show you have pain. Why do you want that? Okay, I gave it. Now what? You're going to tell me to manage that pain? Wallahi, if you tell me to manage that, you've lost my trust. I promise you. Because I'm going to tell you something. The only thing that will heal me is victory. I will forever cry until Palestine is free. Don't tell me otherwise. I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me to cope with it. Don't. And if anyone tries to tell me, don't take it too hard, don't do this, don't do that, I won't trust them. Are they wrong? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the way I'm wired, yeah, my defenses are up. Yeah, my guilt is big, my shame is broad. Yeah, I don't want that. So I will do two things to the world, and I made that commitment to myself, that my final breath will be my shahada. Inshallah, I will declare God is one, and the Prophet, peace and blessing upon him, is his final messenger. And in every moment between that and that final breath, I will, in any camera they put in front of me, tell you from the river to the sea. And you can finish that sentence for me. I will not give in, not give up. And if the burden that I have is to be in pain, it's my test. Psychology is not going to fix that for me. It's not. Because I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to have to live in pain. Now, I'm not saying all of psychology is like that. I'm not saying every psychotherapist is like that. Allahu Alam. I'm saying I'm struggling to understand it. And I'm sure there's brilliant modalities, brilliant therapists, brilliant recognitions, and so forth. But in my journey so far, I feel stuck.
I've had the same thoughts. I'd highly resonate with that. But I took a step back and I asked myself a question. And I haven't been able to answer that question. It's like, okay, inshallah, hypothetically, Palestine is free, or even going back before this current genocide, there have been many other Palestines. The world will always have extremes of human suffering, hell on earth. For our people, for people that look like us, for people that don't look like us. And so I ask myself this, am I using Palestine as an excuse for my inability to cope with the reality of the world?
It's a very profound question. I don't know if I have an answer. I can share the conversation with you. Maybe all three of us can co-author a way out of it. But I don't believe that we will find peace or freedom in the way we think we will in our life. It's just us, tawakkul Allah, it's up to us to fight and do the just and be the moral agent and to be governed by virtue and the exemplar of our Prophet, peace and blessings upon him. But to answer your question about Palestine and its uniqueness, sometimes there are paradigms that speak to global injustice. Palestine presents itself in this immediate moment. What we saw on October 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up until the day we are sitting here today, is a type of violence that is defining to your generation. I could talk about Iraq, I could talk about Afghanistan, I could talk about all of these things, but here is an immediate moment that drags you as an individual, as a person, and asks you a question. Who are you? Right? Who are you? Who are you as a nation? Who are you as an ummah? Who are you as a person? Who are you as a Muslim? And so to answer that question isn't at times I'm privileged in Palestine or to cope, or I'm privileged in Palestine over others. It's the immediate challenge that has come your way. It's confronted you, right? To the point, it's also created a grammar and a language. If I say to you, soul of my soul, you know who I'm talking about. If I say one word, Hind, you know who I'm talking about. It's become our generation's grammar, and unless we can use that grammar to inevitably speak for justice, it will haunt us. Not because the death and the violence is unique in human history. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put it as your generation's test.
It's the situation that unmasked the reality. It's what showed us the world for what it is.
Yeah. And be cognitive, be conscious of the fact that others are also oppressed. Yeah. But you've been asked the question. And one way to turn away from the question is to say, but others are suffering. What can I do? Right? The world's built on violence. But here I am in this moment, and I see it. And as you said, it unmasks so much. So now I have to confront the mirror. Who am I?
Yeah, so I think, I'm feeling a lot of emotions as we speak as well. And I think what you're doing is exactly that in this conversation. You're holding up that mirror. And I think that's why sometimes hearing, and I've heard you speak a couple times before, it's so therapeutic. Maybe that's not the right word, right? Maybe cathartic, whatever it might be. You say what we feel but can't put into words sometimes.
100%.
The fact that you are able to say there is no outcome, there's no solution, look into the face of pain, stare at it, and just stay there is sometimes exactly what we need to hear. And I feel like that's why it's so powerful for you to be saying what you're saying here today, because we don't get to hear that enough. We, of course, tawakkul Allah, go do your CBT, go talk to the people that you love and care about and share and, join community, be a part of the action and all of that. It's so true. But at the end of the day, I think we all need that truth served to us on a platter.
Well, I don't intend to do it. I appreciate the compliment. Thank you so much. And it means something to me, believe me. And as an Arab man, I won't get too mushy about it. Thank you. But I don't mean it. I just feel compelled to throw my head up into the wind and just say it. I mean, look, it's right, sit with it. But I'm also I fight. And the only thing I can fight with is my words, my thoughts. And that's all I have, my heart. Like, I don't have hegemony institution. I don't have any institutional support. None. I teach my community about Islamophobia. No one, sometimes people give me $100 here and there to give a talk. But I'm not backed by an institution. And it's because I feel ultimately around self-determination. I feel we have to stand up on our own 2 feet. And one of the things that you've just said out there is I also feel like too many of us rush to a solution. rush. And then you have to ask, is this psychological? Right? And I don't want to bring it up, but part of my concern with MBMs, not that they're bad people, not they're sincere people, is the system, democracy, call it what you want, parliament at one level is function as a bureaucratic network that makes all sorts of deals and spreads power, especially to tame us. It provides legitimacy by making illegitimate other forms, right? So to rush to something is to stop, like just sit on this and stare at the pain. But a lot of people want to believe and feel like they're doing something, which is wonderful. But you have to know what the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the problem is not going to be solved by an independent in parliament. It's not going to be solved by change of legislation, because that doesn't destroy the racist within you. It doesn't heal shame. It doesn't provide self-determination. In fact, relax, it goes the other way. It tells the system, take care of us. And even if, like the worst case scenario for me is if the system starts to take care of us, 20, 30, 40%, then stops. And then we feel like, hey, look, it's doing something. But we don't want 40%. We want our world. Yeah? And so that part, now as for the therapeutic part, look, Allahu Alam, bro, like my book, when I wrote it, it was tough. And then, you know what was tough? I sent it to the publishers, and then I promised myself I will never think about it, speak about it, talk about it. I hate that thing. And then all of a sudden, I'd get all this feedback. Thank you for putting words to it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then that helped me realize that at one level, what we call the therapeutic here is us trying to make sense of us.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the first step. That's all it is. That's it. It's like, calm down with your solution. Let's just make sense of us. Yeah?
Yeah.
Make sense of why this is happening.
Yeah.
Because we all were, mashallah, inspired when 500,000 people protested in London. I looked at that and it's like, the way everyone's like, wow, big crowd. And I don't know if this is me in that perfectionist voice. I was heartbroken. Not because of the 500,000 that was in London. And I was like, where's Cairo?
Yeah.
Where are they? 500,000 is nothing. Where's Cairo? And I know, I can't blame them. I know what the system is. I know what it is. But my question has never been, is the world ready to save us? My question is, where are we? My question isn't, aren't we voting the right way? My question is, why are in a sea of Arab countries, where are we? And I'm not here to condemn or blame or whatever. That's what colonialism does. Because, you know, is it fair for me to ask a country that's struggling with poverty to go to war against a superpower? I'm not even asking those questions. But we got here somehow where we have to sit and watch. Yeah. And before you rush to solutions, you have to ask that question. Yeah. How did we get here?
Yeah.
How? Yeah. Tell me. Where's Cairo? Where is it? It's just one city. It's the city a country that I'm from. We could name 10 more cities. Right? So the rush to a solution, and there's the last thing I want to say about this, like in this particular point, is often filled with what we call common sense. Ideology fills the gap for us. We just go to Parliament and we represent ourselves, and then they'll listen and they'll hear. Commonsensical, yeah, isn't it? Right? We'll go tell them the truth about what's happening in Palestine, and then they will see the truth and then they'll respond to it. Commonsensical, right? So the ideology fills in the gaps for us. Yeah. It may be commonsensical, but it's not power. Does not work that way.
Yeah.
In fact, I can guarantee you something. You've done it. You've lived it. You've seen it. Go speak truth to power, and sometimes they will punish you for it, because it's the last thing they want to hear. Because it burdens them. It burdens them. They have to do something. Mm-hmm. I think universities don't know what's going on. And I have a belief that the vast majority of people that watch what's going on know what's going on. They just need an outlet. And the Zionist propaganda is very smart. The outlet they give them is Hamas. and he literally stopped thinking. Right? And who is Hamas? We go full circle. Hamas is the archetypical picture of the hyper-masculine Arab Muslim man that cannot be integrated into civilization. We can't integrate this guy into it, bro. Like, so you have to prove you're a doctor and so forth because we can't integrate you. So you deserve to be killed. And not only deserve to be killed, if you're hiding in a hospital, that hospital deserves to be killed.
No mercy.
Absolutely.
They know that, man. They know it. So then we have to figure it out. Sit with that problem. Know who you are, know where we are, know what's going on. Ask yourself questions. Where's Cairo? And then maybe, just maybe, we will give our next generation of Muslims and community better responsibilities other than the responsibility I inherited from my father, which was to become a doctor and have status and to be loved and have my picket fence dream.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
I think that's a really good place to end it too. Kamal, did you want to ask the last question? Because I think that ties in well with what he's saying.
If you could speak to younger Muslim men who are struggling with their place in the world, what would you tell them?
That's an interesting question, but I would actually want to listen as well as to co-author. I think one of the concerns I have with my communities, and I'm going to take the scenic route to answer your question. I used to be amazed at how like a company, East Indian company in the colonial times, could rule an entire country. How is that possible? And then I look at the community, I was like, how are we? So one of the functions of colonialism, it uses us to rule us. Yeah? And we create fractures and silos and contests and so forth.
Sectarianism.
Yep.
Yep.
And so one of the things is that we are governing each other on the behalf of them, right? We are policing each other on the behalf of them. And then we create, I think, fictional ideas of unity that are non-existent at the moment, right? Palestine will unite us, but the solution to Palestine will not unite us, right? Suffering will unite us, but the cure to that suffering will not unite us. So one of the solutions that I have is to raise the political and social and emotional consciousness of our people through a shared, what I can call a native language to us, because too often we're speaking in the other's language. When we're talking about terrorism, we're not talking about our problems, we're talking about their problem. War is our problem, conflict in the region is our problem, freedom is our problem, right? So a lot of times I want us to have conversations with one another without the needs to create a language that is imposed on the good v bad Muslim. Become like, let me listen to you, let me hear you, let me. I said this in another podcast. I don't know if I should. Might take a while. I had a friend called Moe. I was helping him. It's not his real name. I was helping him. HR at his corporate job or whatnot wanted him to present on racism, and as a Muslim, like I think it was just a thing they do. And Moe was preparing a speech, and he came up to me and he showed me, like, look, he's talking to me over the phone, and Moe didn't sound like Moe. Moe started talking about how he grew up in Australia and he used to love fairy bread or Vegemite or something, can't remember, right? And then Pauline Hanson one day pulled the burqa off her in a stunt at the Senate. And on that day, I no longer felt like I belonged. I felt unsafe. And I was like, Moe, I know Moe, bro. Yeah. Moe doesn't talk like that. I'm like, bro, do you really feel like you don't belong? It's like, what do you mean? Like, when you saw her do that, did you really feel unsafe and like you don't belong? He's like, no. I was like, well, what was your impression? He goes, well, I didn't care. I don't care. Like, I won't repeat what he said, but it was like, whatever, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah? And he goes, well, why are you talking like that? Well, I know she was offending the dean. Like, there's a little bit of that, but it's not to the extent where he has to. So why are you talking like that? Because, and it clocked to us that he and us and many of us believe that anti-racism has to sound a particular way. You have to talk about your pain in a particular way. You have to talk about your problems in a particular way. And all of it is designed as them as governor.
Yeah.
Hear me, feel me, I don't belong. When you say to society, I don't belong, what are you really saying? Help me belong to you.
Accept.
Help me assimilate.
Yeah. And so this language, I'm like, no, tell me what you really feel. Who are you, Moe? And then he starts speaking in the way we speak in the mosque. This dunya is a test. I accept that. The Muslim will always be a stranger, right? He starts speaking like that. I'm angry at what they're doing, but we can't talk like that.
No.
So to answer your question, I want to hear these brothers in a vacuum, in a language that is ours, indigenous to our experience and lived experience, to co-author a language that speaks to who we are and not have to continually translate, code, wear masks, because we think somehow if we perform this role of Moe, I don't belong, I don't feel safe, I want to be Australian. Yum, you are. Well, we're integrated in every domain of the country.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of listening or giving them advice, it's about co-authoring a language that is native to our experiences in this country, that carries the trauma and the burdens of our parents and the Muslim Ummah around us. And I think too much of our language in political and social spaces are not our own.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you so much for answering that question. I think aside from the other compliments that have been vocalized, one of my favorite things about speaking with you is the sincerity and how real you can be about these things. And it just feels so calming. It feels so, it feels real. Like it's different to, I think, a lot of the other ways that the conversation can take place where, there's something else to strive for, and this just feels like a break. So thank you so much for being real with us.
Oh, thank you for having Barakallah Feekum.
If I can add as well, I think I think you are co-authoring that language, or helping us co-author that when you speak about these things. And, I know that it takes a great deal of your own safety to come on here and speak about them. And we've talked all about that, right, today?
Man.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, the drive home is going to be rough. Promise you. I'm not comfortable at all.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
And that's part of it, right? But alhamdulillah for you to be here with us today.
No,
and
thank you.
we take we definitely, I think, understand the extent to which, now we understand the extent to which this means for you and our community as well. So jazakallah khair for being with us today.
And let me return the compliment. It's precisely because I know you guys and trust you guys, and we spoke about the lack of space, but 6 degrees is a space. I've never done this before, ever. And I might close on something Sundus had said after that event. She goes, I've never heard you speak like that. So I could say, it's me, but it's also you. You guys have created a space, and I won't like it on the drive home. I'll hate myself for it. I'll ruminate, or why was I vulnerable? But I also know somewhere deep down in my heart that it's necessary for us to have tough conversations. So
incredibly necessary.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Yassir. And with that, we will say assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
We know this conversation may have left some of you with more questions than answers, and maybe that's the point. Not every pain can be explained, and not every struggle can be resolved in the space of an hour. Sometimes what we need most is to know that we're not alone in feeling some way. If anything in this episode stirred something in you, reach out to someone you trust. You don't have to have it all figured out by yourself. And if you or someone you know needs support, we encourage you to reach out. Recommend reaching out to Kids Helpline on 1800 55 1800 for people 5 to 25 years old. Or you can book a session with our Helping Hands team on the 6 Degrees website, 6degrees.org.au. Thank you.